Susan, thank you so much for joining me. I have been noticing your charcoals on LinkedIn for some time and feeling very drawn um, to the dark and light. And there's something about the contrast and the dark in your work that is not how we think of darkness at all.
Mm.
And that has intrigued me. I don't know if you are aware of it, if it's intentional. Do you know what I mean?
Is
So,
that
normally darkness we think of as like a negative,
yes?
right? And for you, it just seems like negative space, but not something negative.
It's very much there's a balance for me. So even when you look at some of my pieces and it's predominantly dark, there's always a balance with the light. And it's not something I necessarily consciously do. It's just something that comes through. So there can be a whole plane of darkness and just a touch of light. But the light is what allows the viewer to be drawn in and then held within the space of darkness. Darkness for me is not a frightening space. It perhaps was in the past when it was more exploring like shadows within my own self. But more and more, the darkness has become a safe place. It's like attuned to meditating and closing my eyes and being able to go into that inner space of quiet. That's what darkness is for me. It's a safe place in which to be absorbed and hopefully allow others to sort of be absorbed as well.
So you're a meditator as well.
I am, yes.
Didn't know that. You didn't know that about me either. And maybe that's what is something being communicated, something quite subtle.
Mm,
You know, your pieces with the woods,
mm,
yeah.
mm,
And again, something about it, I never felt, as you said, anything frightening, troubling. It never stirred any anxiety in me, as you might think if you hear dark woods,
mm,
just as the words. And there was always something so, or when I look at it, I feel something quite mysterious but welcoming.
mm, mm. The woods are a very special place for me. I visit them, they're very close to where I live, and I visit them on a regular basis. The last wood series that I did in November, I was entering the woods every day and I would stand within the woods and I would just do a gentle ask to be to be able to experience or see something that I was supposed to experience, and then I would walk. And
Mm.
in that experience came whatever it was I needed to sort of be with that day. Then I would document it, go back to the studio, and try and translate that experience into a piece. So there were pieces. The last series was a piece done every single day of November, and I had to go with what came. That was what was meant to come that day. So yeah.
And I love the way you speak about your process. Your work is a process, and
Mm,
it sounds like you're groping and feeling your way a lot. And you work very intuitively. So you've talked a lot about letting the space speak back to you or letting yourself feel guided until you figure it out. And I think the longer we can stay in a not knowing space confidently and patiently is the more artistic depth and courage and um, seeing. There's more seeing that happens for us. Would you share some of that for you? Does that combine any of your formal training with your MFA and your philosophy, your PhD in philosophy? Is there any connection to that? Because that's so academic. And then you speak in this very intuitive, meditative, contemplative way.
I think it's because I have done the research that I can do that. Only because it has taught me to trust myself. and to trust what is happening and to know that I have, it's bigger than me. I know that I have no control in the process. I know whatever happens is happening through me and not because of me. And so it's learning to trust that, to be able to speak about that, whereas before I would have thought, this is me, this would be my ego coming in, this is me, I'm doing this. It's not me. I know now it's not me, it's bigger than me. And so it's taken for me the research to be able to let go.
So talk to me then about the time before the letting go, when most of us can speak to the struggle that we find ourselves in. Do you have an uh, a memory of that and a taste of what made the difference for you? That might speak to, I haven't done all the research you've done. I've done some of my own, and I'm also a meditator. But I'm curious, not so much to give advice, but I wonder what you've discovered in yourself that may actually be quite universal to other creatives.
I would have been one of those people who lived life um, recklessly. Like I would just jump into things without full consideration. But at the same time, I was also trying to control things. That was my way of controlling things. And then something happened to me that literally brought me to my knees. It broke me open. That moment that people talk about breaking open, that's what happened to me. And I happened to be, it was just prior to entering the PhD. And when I entered the PhD, I just went in with the mindset, guide me through this. I don't know what I'm doing, just guide me through this. So every step of the way with the PhD was me um, walking into a bookstore and finding a book and it would speak to me. So I'd take the book and I'd read it and there be a link in there to another book. So I would open that book and I would start reading. And it started to be just this beautiful interwoven journey that was happening with me just trusting the process, just trusting what was happening because I wasn't doing it before. I wasn't. That element of me was trying to take control, but needed to let go. And that learning to just trust that process, I'm not always good at it. I often have to remind myself and come back to that. But that is the journey for me. So yeah.
And you said your PhD was about the connection between place in philosophy, had to do with the exploration of place. And how does that stay with you with your work? Because it seems like you say you go somewhere and then you wait to be shown an object or something. Can you describe that process a bit and how your research has informed that?
It was about learning. I was resonating very, very strongly with certain places, certain
Mm.
historical architectural sites, and I couldn't understand. I had no direct connection to them, and yet I would walk into spaces and I would literally feel the energy. I could literally feel the energy in me. And I had no clue what this was about. I didn't understand. So my PhD, and this had been happening for years, my PhD became about trying to understand that connection, that strong connection I had between place and myself. And what I discovered was that that resonance with place was leading me to an understanding of self, a letting go of things within myself, a healing of things in myself. You can, it's like when you have tuning forks and they're of the same frequency, and if you hit one, the other one resonates. That's what it was like for me in a place. It was
Yes,
literally
like a vibration. Yes. Yeah.
so. I needed to understand why that is. So I didn't go in sort of thinking that would take me a journey into self, but
Mm.
it started with place and it took me into this incredible journey into self, which has continued since. Like it's just learning that the outside can somehow take you inside. And there's this beautiful transaction that happens. And it's, yeah.
Yeah. And does that show up in your work or mostly in your process?
Both. I mean, they're intertwined. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Because I mentioned to you that I did do a master's in creative writing, and a lot of my dissertation was just a similar experience, but I was looking for an interlocutor who turned out to be my late aunt, whom I'd never met.
Mm.
And it felt like different things, I was just sort of being led and guided, it's kind of serendipity as you describe it. And really, there's nothing more exciting than that. And I would have to say, that if you can keep that experience alive, it really keeps you creative and creating, don't you think? It's because it's quite effortless and it feels so magical, doesn't it?
100%. Yes, yes. It's
Mm.
interesting because my parents moved from England to Australia before I was born, and I never met my grandparents. But I always felt that I had a very strong affinity with one of my grandmothers. I always sort of felt that I had a guiding hand on my shoulder. I don't know why, particularly in the woods. Particularly, I could feel
Yeah.
guidance in the woods. So yeah,
Those images of the woods, maybe some of that is shining through, some of that
Mhm.
guidance and companionship is what can be detected in the viewer because it didn't feel lost. When you think of dark woods, if I just say the words dark woods, you think of lost, alone, scary. You think of maybe some of the old fairy tales, Little Red Riding Hood, but your wood series, for me, there was none of that. And that's what struck me. It wasn't
Ah,
just what my eyes were seeing, was what I was experiencing. And I thought, how remarkable, and that's, a big part of why I wanted to talk to you to see, what was behind it. So, yeah, I
oh, I
wonder if,
love that
yeah,
actually. It's
what are your
because
thoughts on that when you hear that? Because sometimes, the viewer's completely way off from what the creator is thinking.
you've got a lit something in me. Because a lot of the drawings do have, there's a light at the end, or there's a light through the trees, or uh,
Yeah.
tears actually, because I think you nailed it. Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm so happy to hear. And thank you for being so natural and letting me into those sort of tender spaces too, And that's what I see in your work. One of my aunt whom I mentioned, she was an artist, a cubist, and I had to admit to myself that I was a little disappointed in some of her work. And then I thought to myself, oh, well, you go join an art class and humble yourself and see what you can do, And I'd never trained formally or anything. So I actually did sign up at the Putney School of Arts and I started an portrait class. I did some life drawing and using the charcoal. I felt just when you describe this affinity, this hand and heart, and also what I loved was the removing.
Mm.
So you might start with the medium and then you add and then you remove. It's remarkable how this image is transforming in front of you. And so I really connect with charcoal drawing. Of course, I'm not a trained artist or, like what you're doing, but I could connect with it. And then what happened for me, Susan, is that as a writer, I wanted to do some of that on the page. So I would take the practice of standing in front of the easel and bring it to the page and allow myself a little more freedom as a writer to see what would happen. And it became much more experimental than I'd ever intended.
Mm, beautiful, really beautiful. I'd be interested in seeing so yeah.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days? What's I'm
Um,
seeing some of your beautiful work behind you. Is there something particular you're working on these days? Because you're a full-time artist, you said.
couple of things. So the rose series, the rose that's behind me is not finished, but it is part of a series I've been doing for about 3 years now.
Mm.
My mother, she just passed away, but she had dementia, and I had done a series.
Sorry. My condolences. Yeah.
Thank you. A series of drawings on the deterioration of a rose, and when I exhibited them, and I had written my statement, I had people come up and say, "Look, I've read your words, I've seen your work. This is my story," and
Mm.
incredible gifts in my life. And so I wanted to tell the story of other people who have or have had people in their lives with dementia. So this series is actually roses drawn for other people. It's a series called Every Rose, a Different Story. And they select the rose and they tell me a bit about their story and they
Oh,
photograph the person and I try to connect a little bit with that. I try and allow it just to come together as a connection of person and story and beautiful forms. So every rose is completely different. So it's quite
so
lovely.
tell me a little bit about the one behind you then. Is that something you did for someone or something you did for yourself?
This one is in progress, is nearly done, but it is
Wow, gorgeous.
somebody else. They will hopefully, I will have a chance at some stage to exhibit them, just so they have a chance to talk with one another and also
Yes.
talk about um, dementia beyond the disease, but the people behind the disease, the support people, the families, the stories that are associated. Because I know with my mother, it became all about the dementia, but my mother was more than that. She was much more than that. So that's what
Mm.
that is. This particular series behind me, the dress form, is
Yes, the dread form.
this the second sort of the second installment. I did a series of a dress form and there's an extraordinary story that came about how I came about it. But I just discovered photographs of my grandmother. I had not seen them. My mother had sort of hidden photographs away, and
Mm.
I saw them. And when I found them in Australia, and I came back, and I came across this dress form, and I knew as soon as I saw it that I needed to draw it. And it dated back to when my grandmother would have been a teenager. And so it's a series that it just brings me to maybe what she was thinking when she was that age. And then when my mother passed away, I had already found a dress form that dates back to when my mother was a teenager. And so the series that I'm doing right now is me thinking about my mother at that age. What would she have felt like? Was she, and I know she was adventurous, and I know she was a free spirit, and thinking about those things as I'm working on the pieces.
Right. Was were either women involved in sewing, or is the dress form just symbolic to you of that feminine form, but or was that part of their life in terms of because it reminds me of my mother and my grandmother who were, I mean, they could have worked in Savile Row or Paris or anywhere the way they sewed, you know. They were such fine tailors, seamstresses, yeah.
Mm. And
So,
they did, but they wouldn't have been at the level that you're talking about. One of my grandmothers didn't was hat milliner who did make hats.
uh,
Um, But no, I think it's the form more than anything. It's the form, the feminine form, the history that's embodied within that form. Because yes, I'm bringing my history to the table, but the form also has its history. So it speaks in a very distinct voice when I'm drawing, and it's almost a conversation between what I'm bringing and what it's bringing. Mhm.
And I'm thinking that the form of a generation, women's bodies have changed, or the way we shape clothes on the body has changed. So that must also be an interesting discernment.
Absolutely. The shape of the dress form, I discovered it in a corset store of all places, but it was designed for creating the dresses with the corsets, and it just yeah, it does. This is a different time, a different place, a different way of thinking, a different way of dress. And I can't be there, and I don't know a lot of the stories that came from that, but it allows me to imagine and, through imagination and through just letting go and trusting in the process, I get to experience a little bit of it. So hopefully that translates through in the pieces.
So I'm curious about your philosophy degree and how that um, influences your work, your decision making, and so does it still in a conscious way, or is it just sort of something that has been a part of you and that it's just sort of obviously informing you unconsciously? Or is there sometimes a more intentional connection? Because sometimes when I'm looking at the work behind you, there is a sort of for me, it feels more psychological than philosophical, which is why I asked you about psychotherapy, you know?
Yeah, it when I did like my PhD was done um, through art. So I went in, I chose one of the reasons I chose that particular um, program was because they had a 50-50 focus on actual
Oh,
thinking and research because I had come I had done my MFA a few years earlier. I didn't want to lose the practice. The practice is key for me. So the research is part of it. It's always part of it, but the artwork is always part of it. So I am always researching. Even now, always reading, I'm always researching, I'm listening to things. It's all part of it. So it all becomes embodied in everything I do. I don't think there's a defining line between them. It's just it just sort of feeds in, it fills me, it comes through my work. When I feel empty, I'll go in the woods or I'll read again it's just a constant flow, I think, a flow through. So I don't think, again, it's conscious. I think it just feeds into the practice. It helps the practice grow.
it's interesting that you have such intellectual rigor alongside this depth of intuition as well. Both things seem so clear and strong and supportive of each other,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
which is very beautiful. Um, I'm wondering, tell me a bit in a practical sense about your practice, because you said, it's just part of my practice. What does that look like for you day to day, week to week, month to month?
I wish I could say I was every day, but I don't seem to work that way. And I think that probably speaks to what I've just talked about. There are times where I have to just be filling myself with information, like spending time researching. It's just, and life is, I have a family, so I'm also, that's a part, I'm balancing those things. But then there's times like right now, it's ready to go. Like I know when I'm ready to go. So, and then I'm in the studio, and then I'm in the studio a lot more than I would be at other times. So I balance it out. But it can be exhausting. It's not just necessarily physically exhausting because I stand up and work, but it is emotionally exhausting. And so when I'm with peace, I'm with the peace. And and then I'll need to step away and I'll need to just refill again and regroup. So,
Yeah, so it's sort of seasonal. It sort of comes in seasons.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And it's funny enough, summer is probably when I feel the most alive, when I should be outside more. I'm actually something about, but also the winter too. And again, you would think it would be a time for just cozying down and reading, but they seem to be the times, whereas spring and the fall seem to be where I replenish perhaps a little bit more.
Yes. In fact, when I heard you speaking, I actually intended seasonal to mean it's as though you're crafting around your own inner seasons.
Yes.
That's what I was hearing. It's sort of like you can feel when you're ripe, so to speak. You can feel when you're fallow and things sort of need to be left off.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's interesting. It would be interesting to observe like how our inner seasons and if they mesh or if they're opposed to what's happening externally in the climate, you know? Yeah.
Mhm. It's funny, I hadn't really thought about it until you actually asked the question. But yes, I think that is exactly right. It's
Mm,
yeah, yeah. It's intuitive reaction. I just know. Mm.
yeah. Because where I'm from in Trinidad in the Caribbean, of course, we don't have these marked four seasons. It might be dry, it might be wet, but basically it's the same temperature. The light might vary maybe an hour on either side, but never very much. And that's usually our winter, a little bit longer in summer, but not these long sunny days of sunlight. So we don't have much contrast. I think our biggest contrast in terms of place and climate is we do get a big blooming season when there's lots of color on the trees and fruit, the mangoes and the fruiting and so happening. So I think place must definitely impact our work too significantly.
I think it really impacts our our inner connection. Like I grew up in Australia, in Western Australia, and it's beautiful. Like it is a beautiful place. But for some reason, I knew as early as I'm going to say 9, maybe 10, that I couldn't live there long term. Like
Uh-huh.
I just knew there was something about the light that I loved early in the morning,
Hmm.
about the light that just didn't resonate with me. I knew then, and my husband and I lived in Calgary, Alberta, for a number of years. Again, a beautiful, beautiful place. But the light just, there's something about the light that just,
Amazing.
when I came to Vancouver, um, I felt like I was home. I just, it is something about the moisture and the light, and it just deeply resonates me. So I knew when I came here, I don't have any history here, but it just felt like home for me, that I had finally come to where I needed to be.
And have you seen more productivity, more creativity as a result? Or has it
Well,
just been a sense of feeling more at home within yourself and your life?
well, part of my research was about you just coming home to selves. So, I looked at places as home, and I looked at the house as a home, like all of those sorts of things. Community, like what was it that was necessary for me to come home to myself? And then it became a journey of really coming within and home to myself. So it seemed to be a journey that almost came from moving places to finding the right home to coming into myself and finding home. And so I think that is feeling safe in where I live, but also safe within the environment. And that is essentially when my art switched full time to black and white. And that is where I started to explore this through this medium only.
Right. And do you think you will stay in it? It feels like home, when I as there's no sense of absence of anything. There's no absence of color per se. You understand? There's just and I think I can't think of maybe black and white photographs I've had that sort of resonance with. I can't think of charcoal or black and white work that I've resonated with in such a intriguing way before, you know? Maybe black and white photos have that impact. So do you
Mm.
have a sense of staying with that medium? You think it's for a season. Of course, you can't predict, I know, but what's your inner sense telling you?
Well, I would like to say that I would explore something else, but I'm just not sure that it's going to happen.
Mm,
Because it is the journey for me. And because
mm,
I work so intuitively in this medium, I know that my strongest work is going to come through this medium. If I switch to something else, and I understand there'd be a learning phase, and perhaps it could happen, but I've worked with this so long that I know that the flow is there. And I
yeah.
know that I can let go, and I know that what needs to come through will come through because I don't have to think about the process. It just does it. Mm.
There's something so beautiful about visual artists, and particularly you, when I hear you talk about your process, that I want to have some of that, more of that in my writing and my all my verbose wordage. I want to feel that sense of because it's not just about words. I'm never at a loss for words.
Mm.
But there's an artistry and an intuition and a flow and ease that you communicate. And I
Mm.
really love and admire and hope to um, resonate with some of that as I leave our conversation this month. But I'm going to give you the last few minutes, Susan, to tell in case anyone does decide to pop in and listen to us. Is there anything you want them to know? Anywhere you want them to find you? You can give me your links and I will post them as well.
Well, they can take a look at my profile on LinkedIn. I'm often communicating on there. I, yeah, I have a website. I have a gallery that represents me. They're based in Mumbai in India, and I have
Oh,
an exhibition coming up the end of August called The Weight of What Remains, actually. So looking
say that
into
again. The
weight of,
weight.
yeah, the weight
Ah, weight of what remains. Beautiful.
of essentially what we've been talking about in form, in object, in, yeah.
Fine. So if someone is interested, should they reach out to you directly or to the gallery?
Well, for a
Somebody
conversation,
wants to follow up with about your work in particular.
they would need to represent, yes. But if they want,
Represent, yeah.
yes, then
Chat
I.
or connect. Okay, well, that's very kind and generous of you. So I'm just going to uh, stop and then we can see.